Well, my first thought was what I said a while ago. What? What in the world? How did they get that thing up there, you know? And we hadn't even come close. And you might know that the first one we tried didn't make it. It just got about 30 feet off the pad, and boom, you know. But by the time we finished all the programs I was working on, we had numbers in the hundreds of satellites that we had shot and had accomplished what we wanted them to accomplish. You realize that a lot of times, once we got what we wanted to accomplish with a particular satellite, we turned it around, fired the engine again, and let it go in the ocean. And by that time, we knew how to program engine firings and stuff that would put them in some spot where they couldn't hurt individuals and that. In fact, we had a program that I was going to work on that would have shot over Los Angeles, and they decided, no, they better not do that. And our boss' comment was, hey, it's just Los Angeles. And then what was my attitude when they actually landed on the moon? Wow, I cheered. Wow, we made it, you know. And our program had a lot to do. You realize that the speed of the satellites, if they're in orbit, is 18,000 miles an hour to keep them in orbit. And we were putting people in these things and still going to bring them together. And the way we did it, we had a low Earth orbit. We brought the two vehicles together. And during that time, just to prove that we could do it, the federal government said, can you shoot one of those and take over the altitude that men have been in? Well, yeah, we can. We fired one of them and put it up at 8,000 miles. You know, 800 miles in orbit. And we'd never had human beings 800 miles above the Earth, flying around in a metal satellite, you know. So that was a big accomplishment for us. And I would say that probably the biggest accomplishment was when Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon. There were a lot of people saying they didn't really go there, guys. That they faked that. That's out in the Arizona desert. Well, that wasn't true. We did put them on the moon because they have now accomplished. In fact, the Japanese helped us there. They put a satellite in orbit around the moon, and they got some pictures of some of the equipment that we left on the moon. That kind of stuff. So, but just in the accomplishment of going from a 20% successful ratio to a 90% ratio was fantastic. And so the accomplishments we got, Jesse, and then the fact that after I retired, I could go back to work as a volunteer in other things and still use the technology that I had learned to use and thoughts that I had, like putting in the sound and video system in our church. And nowadays, due to the fact of the pandemic, we're able to continue to have church services and that kind of stuff as a result of the fact that we had the technology to transmit this via telemetry, and that's like telemetry that we were using in the space program. Okay, well, what we would do, we would have these special rooms where we tested these things, and whoever built the equipment that was gonna do the job we wanted to put the satellite over Russia for. Are they building more missile complexes, you know, like, we'd take a lot of pictures. And like I said, we could read the car license on the cars.
Wow.
And we would know that, hey, they've got 15 more cars at the launch site. Wonder who that is, you know, and then we would study that and we'd take more pictures. And of course, they were able to do the same thing to us.
Right.
And in fact, one time we were setting at T-minus 10 minutes and ready to give the okay go, and the launch conductor said, we're in a hold. There is a Russian spooky going over, and he's taken some of the data off of our telemetry systems, and we know he is, and so we want you guys to shut down. So we would shut down, and then we'd come back, and you sit there and you watch, you use the telemetry to say, they always want to know on the ground before it's launched, is the bird working like it's supposed to? And so you have, I had a certain page that looked at pressures of the propellant tanks, looked at temperatures of boxes to make sure there wasn't something wrong with one of the boxes or everything. And then they would say telemetry, and I'd answer them, and the launch conductor would say, are you ready for launch? Copy, we're ready for launch. And then they would launch. Occasionally, we lost 2 birds in the 30 years that I worked at Lockheed. We lost 2 birds, but it was parts problems that caused the loss of those 2 birds. But that's out of probably 35 or 40 launches over my 30-year thing, you know.
Wow.
And that was really very important to me. And I had a chart, a whole bunch of data, and the numbers had to be, they were, 24 bits, and would tell me on the various measurements in there. And I had a chart in my notebook that said, okay, for all of these numbers, this one's got to be 35, this one's got to be 10, and all. And I would say, we're go for launch as a result. And what was really fun for me is that Doug had come to work at Lockheed, and he was sitting, they gave him the privilege of coming and listening to the count, and I was in Vandenberg, and he said, hey, my dad did that, you know, and that meant more to me than anything, that he could say, my dad did that. Or we had an engineer, as you saw in my answers I gave, that he went to California and went to work for Lockheed in Sunnyvale. And he wrote back a letter to us guys, because you guys have all worked with those engines, and you understand the instrumentation and the things that has to be used to verify the engines are good. We use that same technology for the satellites that we put in orbit. Oh, yeah, and we think we can use all of you guys. Well, not a bunch of them didn't want to leave Missouri. I didn't care where it was, as long as I had a job. So I grabbed my wife and Dave and Janie, and bang, we moved to California. And along the process of moving, Doug came along, and we're doing good. Great, making good money, working lots of hours. Stayed with Lockheed then for 33 years, and that was kind of the changeover from, a lot of guys would change who they were working for in the missile field or in the rocket field. But I really loved that job at Lockheed. And then JFK comes along and says, we're going to put a man on the moon. And boy, we knew then we were You know, we had a good chance of working for maybe the next 20 years.
Right.
Well, it was 30,
Mhm.
actually 33 years
Mhm.
that I worked in aerospace then. And just learned and learned and learned.
Sure.
They came to Lockheed and they sat down in the control room where I was running the program as program director for that, as the lead test engineer. We went through an orbital sequence, and we were in a thermal vacuum chamber, which simulated, what, 250 miles or something above the Earth, which is where the original small Earth orbit going to the moon. But anyway, they came out and sat down, and we talked, and you know what they were concerned about? There was no flag, American flag, on the satellite any place there. And we said, oh, we can fix that for you. And so we put an American, stuck a flag on the side of the thing.